Berkeley's position is known as idealism, which is compatible with empiricism. For if we say that physical objects are ultimately perceptions, then we can know those objects through perceptual experiences. However, idealism seems counterintuitive. Who thinks that physical objects like tables and chairs are only perceptions? We have a pretty strong inclination to think that physical objects are made out of something, matter, that can exist independently of being perceived. This is something that Descartes reasoned, but that we don't really buy. The fact that a philosophical theory goes against the grain of common sense isn't necessarily a serious flaw. However, all things considered, it's always preferable to adapt a theory that squares well with our common sense view of the world. We've heard this before. The more serious weakness in Berkeley's idealism is that it seems to make it very difficult to distinguish between true and false perceptual beliefs. In certain situations, we're prone to experience perceptual illusions. For example, when we walk through a desert, we might experience a mirage or see water in the distance, although in reality there's only hot sand. If we believe in the existence of mind-independent physical world, we can explain these situations as follows. Our perceptual belief that there is water in the distance is false because our perception was not caused by water, but by hot air moving above the surface of the desert sand. This explanation requires us to think about the hot air above the desert sand as a mind-independent physical object, since only mind-independent physical objects can play the appropriate causal role. We've seen, however, that Berkeley's idealism denies that there are mind-independent physical objects. According to his analysis, physical objects are ultimately perceptions. So Berkeley can't explain the mirage in the same way we just did. At this point, an idealist has two options. Either decide that perceptual beliefs can never be false, or else revise the ordinary account of how perceptual beliefs can be false. The first option doesn't seem very attractive, and the second option suggests that idealism is philosophically rather complex. According to our good old criteria or standard Occam's razor, we have to reason to prefer a simpler explanation to a more complicated one. So although Berkeley's idealism is a logically possible scenario, it certainly does not offer the simplest explanation of mistaken perceptual beliefs, and we therefore have cause to be hesitant before we embrace any form of idealism. Of course, we could always go back to Descartes' evil genius. So let's quickly summarize the main conclusions of this discussion of perception before we move on to some more serious problems. We've seen that empiricism needs a theory of perception that supports the principle that if we perceive an object to have a property, that the object indeed has the property. This principle is best supported by naive realism, but naive realism seems on closer examination to give way to indirect realism about perceptions. And indirect realism, in turn, seems to lead to skepticism or collapse into idealism. This has something to do, for example, with Descartes' wax candle example. If we combine, as Berkeley did, idealism with empiricism, we seem to be in conflict with the principle of Occam's razor, that the simplest explanation is the best. None of this is absolutely fatal for empiricism, but it does show that an empiricist has to do serious philosophical work before being able to confidently assert that our knowledge of the world goes hand in hand with our experiences of the world. Thus, we're still left in the search for a theory of knowledge.